The Harrington estate had always been too large for one person, but Eleanor Harrington refused to leave it. The house stood on the northern edge of Charleston, framed by live oaks and heavy with the scent of salt drifting in from the harbor. After her husband died, the rooms seemed to expand, swallowing sound, stretching silence into something that felt almost physical. On a gray Thursday afternoon, Eleanor walked into her late husband's library for no particular reason. She did not need a book. She did not expect anything to be different. It was simply a habit, one formed after 42 years of marriage. The room still carried traces of him, polished mahogany, tobacco leaves he no longer smoked, and the faint cologne that lingered in the leather of his reading chair. Against the far wall stood a narrow display case. It had remained locked since the funeral. Except now it wasn't. The small brass key still hung from its ribbon inside Eleanor's desk drawer, untouched. Yet the case door stood slightly ajar, and the velvet pedestal inside was empty. For a moment she did not react. The mind has a way of rejecting what it cannot immediately accept. She stepped closer, expecting the watch to materialize if she simply looked long enough. It did not. The space where the antique pocket watch had rested for over 2 centuries was bare. A faint imprint remained in the velvet, like a ghost refusing to fade. The watch had belonged to generations of Harrington men. Crafted in Geneva in 1794, encased in hand-engraved gold, it had survived revolutions, transatlantic voyages, and the collapse of fortunes. It was valued at nearly $3 million. But to Charles Harrington, it had never been about value. It keeps time, he used to say. And time keeps us honest. Eleanor's hands trembled, not with panic, but with recognition. She knew exactly who had taken it. The sound of a car engine pulled her toward the window. A sleek metallic blue Aston Martin rolled into the circular driveway, sunlight splintering across its curved body. It was the kind of car that announced its arrival before the driver stepped out. Benjamin stepped from the driver's side first, adjusting his cufflinks, grinning with unrestrained satisfaction. He circled the vehicle slowly, admiring his reflection in the polished paint. Then came Olivia, Eleanor's daughter. She looked radiant, excited, flushed with pride. She waved toward the house before Benjamin even closed the door. Eleanor stood perfectly still. By the time they entered the foyer, Benjamin was already describing horsepower and torque, his voice echoing against marble floors. Olivia reached her mother first, embracing her tightly. "Mom, wait until you see it up close. It's incredible." Eleanor's voice, when it came, was calm. "Where is your father's watch?" Olivia froze. Just for a second. Then she exhaled, as if bracing for inconvenience rather than confrontation. "We sold it," she said plainly. Ben needed something reliable for his new clients. Image matters. Benjamin stepped forward, slipping his arm around Olivia's waist. "It was sitting in a box, Eleanor. Money shouldn't just sleep." The words landed with unsettling softness. Eleanor studied them both. There was no shame in their posture.
No hesitation.
Only justification. "Did you know what it was?" she asked quietly. Olivia lifted her chin. "Of course I did. That's why it made sense." Charles Harrington had driven the same dark green Jaguar for 18 years. He believed wealth was a tool, not a performance. Even at the height of his firm's success, he avoided extravagance. The watch had never been displayed at parties. He rarely spoke of it outside private evenings with Eleanor, when the house was quiet, and he would wind it slowly, listening to its steady tick. He once told her, "Temptation reveals character faster than hardship ever will." At the time, she had thought it philosophical nonsense. Now she understood. That night, Eleanor did not cry. Instead, she went to her late husband's study desk and retrieved a sealed envelope tucked inside a folder labeled simply Archives. She had been instructed never to open it unless the watch was gone. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Charles's. If you are reading this, it has already happened. Her breath slowed. Inside were documents, dated nearly a decade before his illness. Legal language, structured clauses, notarized signatures. She read each line carefully, her heartbeat steadying with every paragraph. The pocket watch had never been listed as a mere asset. It had been categorized as a behavioral instrument. Its removal, sale, or transfer without unanimous trustee consent activated a comprehensive financial review of all associated beneficiaries. Eleanor sat back in her chair. Charles had never intended to preserve the watch forever. He had intended to measure something else entirely. 2 days passed before Olivia returned. This time without Benjamin's enthusiasm. The Aston Martin gleamed in the driveway like a trophy. They sat in the formal sitting room, sunlight filtering through sheer curtains. Olivia spoke first. "Mom, the dealership called. Something about the title paperwork. It's probably nothing." Eleanor folded her hands in her lap. "Did the buyer of the watch file provenance documents?" Olivia blinked.
Yes.
"Of course. That's standard. And did they mention a trust review clause?" Benjamin scoffed lightly. "Look, Eleanor, everything was legal. We had lawyers." "Yes," she replied. "So, did Charles." The silence thickened. Later that evening, Benjamin received a call. His confident tone shifted quickly into irritation. "What do you mean under review?" he demanded into the phone. "We paid in full." Olivia's phone rang minutes later. Then came emails. Then formal letters. The watch's provenance registration had triggered the trust's conditional review. Not an accusation. Not a lawsuit.
A review.
Every financial movement connected to the sale was temporarily flagged. The car title could not transfer until the review concluded. Funds that had passed through intermediary accounts required verification. Nothing illegal, just scrutiny. And scrutiny, Charles believed, was the purest mirror. 3 days later, Eleanor met with a family attorney, Mr. Aldrich, whose hair had turned fully silver since the funeral. He listened without surprise. "Your husband anticipated this possibility," Aldrich said evenly. "The clause is not punitive. It evaluates stewardship." "And if stewardship fails?" Eleanor asked. "Control reverts to the surviving trustee." Eleanor felt no triumph, only confirmation. Back at the estate, the Aston Martin sat motionless. Neighbors admired it less once it stopped moving. Benjamin's business partners began asking cautious questions. Investors disliked ambiguity. Olivia returned one evening alone. Her makeup was smudged. Her composure fractured. "Did Dad plan this?" she whispered. "He planned for temptation," Eleanor answered. "That's not fair." "No," Eleanor said gently. "It's honest." Olivia stared at the floor. "We didn't think it mattered." "That," Eleanor replied, "was the test. The review would take months. During that time, no trust distributions would be authorized. Benjamin's expansion plan stalled. Invitations to social gatherings declined. The car remained brilliant and useless. Eleanor did not intervene. She walked the gardens each morning, hands clasped behind her back, feeling for the first time that Charles's absence had shape rather than emptiness. He had not tried to control the future. He had designed a moment that would clarify it. One evening, as twilight settled over the estate, Eleanor stood again before the empty display case. The watch was gone, but its purpose had been fulfilled. Time had kept them honest after all. The Harrington estate no longer felt grand. It felt suspended. Weeks passed, yet nothing truly moved forward. The Aston Martin remained in the driveway, a gleaming sculpture that could not legally change hands. Its engine started, but the title remained under administrative hold pending completion of a financial verification process initiated by the provenance disclosure of the Harrington watch. Benjamin had never experienced delay without explanation. He was accustomed to speed, to signatures that followed his requests, to assistants who anticipated obstacles before they formed. Now, every call he made ended with the same careful language. Pending review. Awaiting documentation. Temporary restriction. Words that meant nothing and everything. Olivia tried to keep calm at first. She insisted it was procedural.
Standard.
A technicality that would dissolve with patience. But patience was not a muscle she had ever been forced to develop. Eleanor observed quietly. She answered calls when Olivia reached out, but she offered no interference.
No shortcuts. No persuasión.
The promise she had made to Charles echoed with increasing clarity. If anyone tries to sell it, let them. Do not warn them. Just watch. The first formal letter arrived on a Monday morning. Heavy cream paper. Neutral tone. A request for clarification regarding beneficiary conduct under Conditional Stewardship Clause 14b. Olivia read it twice before understanding. Beneficiary conduct. She repeated aloud in her townhouse kitchen. We didn't do anything wrong. Benjamin paced behind her, phone pressed to his ear, leaving a third voicemail for the dealership manager. This is harassment, he muttered. But it wasn't harassment. It was structure. The watch, as it turned out, had not simply been an heirloom. It had been designated within the Harrington Trust as a catalyst asset. Its unauthorized liquidation triggered an automatic governance review of all connected beneficiaries. The trust had been layered, trusts within holding entities within family foundations. Charles had built his financial architecture the way he built his arguments in court, quietly, precisely, and years before anyone else saw the need. 3 days later, Benjamin received notice that 2 business accounts used during the vehicle purchase were under compliance review for transactional transparency. Funds were not seized. They were not accused. They were examined. Investors disliked examination. At a dinner meeting that Friday, one of Benjamin's largest clients leaned back in his chair and asked casually, "Everything stable on your end?" The question was mild. The implication was not. Across town, Eleanor sat in her smaller breakfast room with Mr. Aldridge reviewing updates. The trust does not punish indulgence, Aldridge explained, adjusting his glasses. It evaluates motive connected to fiduciary responsibility. And their motive? Eleanor asked. To convert a generational asset into personal display. Eleanor nodded once. Charles had feared not poverty, but impulsiveness disguised as confidence. Olivia began visiting the estate more often. Not defiantly. Not proudly.
Carefully.
The distance between her and Benjamin had become visible. Conversations between them carried edge. He blamed inefficiency. She blamed oversight. Neither blamed themselves, not yet. One evening she arrived alone again. The Aston Martin's absence was noticeable. It had been transported temporarily back to the dealership storage lot until the title complication was resolved. Neighbors whispered. Eleanor poured tea without ceremony. I didn't think it would spiral like this, Olivia said, staring into her cup. We sold something that belonged to the family. We didn't break a law.
No, Eleanor replied softly.
You broke alignment. Olivia frowned. Alignment with what? With intention. The room fell still. Charles had spoken often about alignment, about decisions reflecting values rather than appetite. At the time, Olivia had rolled her eyes at what she considered philosophical excess. Now philosophy had become paperwork. 2 weeks later came the formal trustee session. Neutral conference room. Long oak table. No family portraits.
No softness.
Benjamin wore his most tailored suit, projecting control. Olivia sat beside him, hands folded too tightly. Across from them sat Eleanor and Mr. Aldridge, accompanied by a second legal advisor representing the foundation wing of the trust. The language was deliberate. The sale of the Harrington watch met criteria for stewardship review trigger under Clause 14b due to conversion of protected legacy asset into non-essential depreciating commodity absent unanimous trustee consent. Benjamin interrupted. It was an investment in professional presence. The advisor responded calmly. The trust defines professional necessity differently. Silence. The review outlined next steps: temporary suspension of discretionary distributions, full transparency of recent financial movements, and assessment of future eligibility for asset oversight. Nothing was confiscated. Nothing was criminal. Everything was measured. When the meeting adjourned, Benjamin exited first, jaw tight. Olivia lingered a moment longer, eyes searching her mother's face for intervention. Eleanor offered none. That night, arguments filled the townhouse. You said it was fine, Benjamin snapped. You said it would elevate us, Olivia shot back. It should have. But it didn't. For the first time, doubt entered the space between them. Meanwhile, Eleanor began restructuring the estate. She listed the Charleston property, discreetly. Not from bitterness, but from clarity. The house had fulfilled its chapter. She no longer needed to guard empty display cases. In quiet hours, she reread Charles's original memorandum attached to the trust design. Legacy is not what survives. It is what withstands temptation. The words felt less severe now, more instructive. By the end of the month, the dealership formally notified Benjamin that the vehicle's full registration could not finalize until the trust review concluded. Insurance providers adjusted premiums due to provisional ownership status. Image began to cost more than it projected. Benjamin's business partner requested a temporary pause on a joint expansion plan. Just until the review clears, he said diplomatically. It was the first tangible consequence beyond inconvenience. Olivia visited Eleanor again, but this time she did not defend the decision. I thought inheritance meant freedom, she admitted quietly. It means responsibility, Eleanor answered. I didn't know. You didn't ask. That struck deeper than accusation. The review process extended into its second month. Accountants combed through transaction chains. Attorneys confirmed compliance structures. Everything remained legal. Yet legality had never been the metric. The trust evaluated stewardship maturity, decision-making patterns under access to sudden liquidity. Benjamin began speaking of the watch resentfully, as if it had personally betrayed him. That antique clock ruined everything, he muttered once. It was a watch, Olivia corrected absently. It was leverage, he insisted.
No.
It had been revelation. Late one evening, Eleanor received a formal preliminary determination. Control of principal trust assets would revert solely to the surviving spouse pending multi-year demonstration of financial prudence by secondary beneficiaries. In simple terms, Olivia would not access discretionary wealth again without oversight and time. Eleanor closed the letter slowly. She did not feel victorious. She felt the weight of fulfillment. Charles had not tried to protect wealth from the world. He had tried to protect it from impulse. Across town, the Aston Martin sat under dealership lighting, polished daily yet unmoved. Its brilliance now looked excessive rather than impressive. Benjamin stared at it through the showroom glass one afternoon, arms crossed, expression hardened. It had been meant to symbolize arrival. Instead, it symbolized exposure. Olivia stood beside him quietly. We should have waited, she said finally. Benjamin did not respond. Waiting was precisely what the trust required now. Time, the one thing the watch had always measured, was the only path forward. Back at her new, smaller residence overlooking a quiet marina, Eleanor stood on the balcony at dusk. The air carried salt and distance. She felt neither anger nor sorrow. Only understanding. Temptation had knocked. Character had answered. And time, as Charles promised, had kept them honest. By the third month, the situation no longer felt temporary. It felt structural. The Harrington Trust's review had moved from quiet verification to formal evaluation. Accountants had completed transactional mapping. Attorneys had drafted preliminary findings. Nothing unlawful had been discovered, yet the tone of every communication remained firm and measured, as though the process itself was designed not to accuse, but to observe reactions under strain. And reactions were exactly what began to surface. Benjamin had built his career on momentum. He thrived in rooms where confidence filled silence and bold decisions were rewarded. But scrutiny operated differently. Scrutiny did not challenge directly. It waited. It allowed doubt to grow in the spaces between certainty. 2 investors withdrew from a pending partnership, citing strategic timing adjustments. A supplier requested revised payment guarantees. One longtime client politely postponed a renewal meeting. No one mentioned the trust review directly. They didn't need to. Reputation moves faster than explanation. Olivia felt it first in social circles. Invitations slowed. Conversations became careful. A friend asked casually over lunch, "Is everything settled with your father's estate?" The word settled lingered longer than it should have. At home, tension thickened. "You're overthinking this," Benjamin insisted one evening as he scrolled through emails. "These people are cautious by nature." Olivia folded her arms. They weren't cautious 3 months ago. That was before rumors. Rumors about what? He didn't answer, because there were no clear rumors, only the subtle awareness that something was under examination. The Aston Martin remained in storage. The dealership, polite but firm, reminded them weekly that extended holding incurred fees. Insurance premiums adjusted again due to prolonged provisional status. What had once felt like a triumphant purchase now felt like a financial weight with polished edges. Meanwhile, Eleanor's life had grown simpler. She finalized the sale of the Charleston estate and relocated fully to a coastal condominium overlooking the marina. The new space was modest compared to the Harrington house. 2 bedrooms, wide windows, clean white walls. No grand staircase. No echoing library. No display cases. For the first time in years, she slept without wandering hallways at night. Mr. Aldridge visited her there one afternoon with updated documentation. "The review committee has reached its behavioral assessment stage," he explained. "They are less concerned with the sale itself and more focused on subsequent conduct." Conduct, Eleanor repeated.
Yes.
Transparency, accountability, response to limitation. Eleanor understood. The trust was not measuring the mistake. It was measuring the reaction to consequence. Across town, Benjamin's patience fractured. "This is ridiculous," he snapped during a call with the dealership manager. "We paid for that vehicle. In full. Ownership is subject to verification," the manager replied calmly. "We're following compliance protocol." Benjamin ended the call abruptly. Olivia watched him from the kitchen doorway. "It was supposed to help us," she said quietly. "It still will."
How?
He hesitated. Confidence without control begins to look like denial. That evening, Olivia drove alone to the marina. She found her mother sitting on the balcony, watching sailboats drift in the fading light. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Olivia said, "He's angry all the time." Eleanor did not ask who. "Anger is easier than reflection," she replied gently. Olivia sank into the chair opposite her mother. The wind lifted strands of her hair, softening an expression that had grown sharper in recent months. "I thought success meant moving forward," Olivia admitted. "Taking opportunities. Showing progress." "And what does progress mean now?" Eleanor asked. Olivia stared at the horizon. "I'm not sure." The review's second formal meeting took place in early autumn. This time the tone was more conclusive. The trustees outlined findings. While the sale had been legally executed, it demonstrated prioritization of image over preservation of legacy. Subsequent responses, including defensiveness, delayed transparency, and attempts to expedite asset clearance reinforced concerns regarding fiduciary maturity. Benjamin bristled. So, because we bought a car, we're irresponsible? The senior trustee answered evenly. Because you liquidated a generational asset for immediate display without consultation, yes. The room fell silent. The trust recommended a 5-year oversight period before reconsideration of discretionary access. During that time, any financial ventures seeking trust backing would require independent performance benchmarks. 5 years. To Benjamin, it sounded punitive. To Eleanor, it sounded precise. Outside the conference room, Olivia confronted him. You should have let them finish, she said. They're humiliating us. They're evaluating us. There's a difference. Is there? Her question lingered. Back at the dealership, the Aston Martin storage fees accumulated. Its market value depreciated quietly. What had been purchased as a symbol of upward movement now represented stalled momentum. Benjamin suggested selling it at a minor loss once restrictions lifted. For practicality, he insisted. Olivia didn't argue. Something in her had shifted. Not dramatically. Not overnight. But subtly, like a recalibration rather than collapse. One afternoon she returned to the marina alone. I was proud of it, she confessed to her mother. The car. The attention. I liked that people looked. And now? Eleanor asked. Now I wonder what they were really seeing. Eleanor considered her daughter carefully. Your father believed wealth magnifies what already exists, she said. If there is patience, it grows patience. If there is insecurity, it grows that too. Olivia absorbed the words quietly. The trust finalized its determination in writing 3 weeks later. Primary authority over all principal assets remained exclusively with Eleanor. Secondary beneficiaries retained potential future eligibility contingent upon demonstrated financial prudence, stability, and alignment with trust values over the review period.
No anger.
No moral language. Just structure. Benjamin reacted with cold calculation.
Fine, he said.
We build without it. But building without the cushion of expectation required discipline he had rarely practiced.
Client censé d'urgency.
Partners negotiated harder terms. Expansion slowed. Pressure, unlike temptation, revealed cracks more slowly but more permanently. Winter approached. The Aston Martin was finally released once the provisional ownership review closed. The title transferred legally, fully, and without celebration. Benjamin drove it home that evening.
No neighbors gathered.
No photos were posted. It sat in the driveway, engine ticking softly as it cooled. Olivia stood beside it, hands in her coat pockets. It doesn't feel the same, she said. Benjamin didn't respond. Because shine depends on admiration. And admiration had shifted to caution. At the marina, Eleanor walked along the dock, watching the tide recede. She felt neither vindication nor bitterness. Only a quiet understanding that her husband's design had worked precisely as intended. The watch had measured time for generations. But in its final act within the Harrington family, it had measured something far more fragile. Character under access. Olivia began attending financial planning seminars on her own. Quietly, without telling Benjamin at first. She met with an independent advisor unrelated to the trust, determined to understand the frameworks she had once dismissed as unnecessary. It wasn't rebellion. It was awakening. Benjamin noticed eventually. You don't trust me? He asked sharply. I don't trust impulse anymore, she replied. That answer changed something between them. Not explosively, but definitively. The trust's 5-year clock had begun. And unlike the antique watch, it could not be wound faster. Time would pass regardless. The only question was what it would reveal next. 5 years is a long time when measured in frustration. It is a short time when measured in growth. The Harrington Trust's oversight period did not announce itself loudly. It moved quietly through seasons, through market fluctuations, strained conversations, recalibrated ambitions, and moments of unexpected clarity. In the first year, Benjamin fought it. He pursued new ventures aggressively, determined to prove that he did not need legacy capital to succeed. Some projects advanced. Others faltered. Without the safety net of discretionary distributions, risks carried real weight. Decisions could no longer be softened by inherited security. Investors negotiated harder. Banks asked more questions. Contracts required more collateral. Momentum slowed, but it did not stop. For the first time, Benjamin began reviewing numbers personally instead of delegating them entirely. He attended compliance briefings. He asked about risk exposure before asking about projected return. It was not humility yet, but it was adjustment. Olivia's transformation was quieter. She enrolled in a graduate program focused on financial ethics and fiduciary responsibility. She did not announce it publicly. She did not frame it as redemption. She framed it as understanding. At first, Benjamin dismissed it. "You don't need a degree to manage money," he said. "I need perspective," she replied. Perspective, she discovered, was not about technical skill. It was about intent, about how access to capital amplifies values already present, about the psychology of sudden liquidity, about intergenerational wealth decay when stewardship is assumed instead of earned. Case studies echoed uncomfortably close to home. Families fractured over entitlement. Foundations dissolved because governance was symbolic rather than operational. Heirs mistook ownership for authority. She listened carefully. Across town at the marina, Eleanor built a new rhythm of life. Mornings were spent walking along the docks. Afternoons volunteering at a legal clinic that assisted families in structuring transparent estate plans. Evenings reading by the window, watching tide patterns shift against the pier. The absence of the watch no longer felt like loss. It felt complete. Occasionally, she received updates from Mr. Aldridge. Annual compliance summaries, performance reports, behavioral assessments. The language was clinical, but the trajectory was visible. Year 2, reduced volatility in beneficiary spending. Increased financial transparency. Year 3, independent venture profitability without trust support. Year 4, documented philanthropic contributions initiated by secondary beneficiary without obligation. Year 5, stable financial governance practices demonstrated consistently. It was not perfection. It was progress. The Aston Martin remained part of their lives, though it no longer occupied the center of attention. Benjamin drove it less frequently. Not from shame, but from diminished novelty. The vehicle had become transportation rather than statement. Its shine dulled in subtle ways. Fine scratches, softened leather creases, routine maintenance replacing showroom polish. Symbolism fades when routine sets in. One evening in early spring of the 5th year, Olivia invited her mother to dinner. Not at a restaurant designed to impress, but at their home. The townhouse had been refinanced responsibly. Interiors were modestly updated. The atmosphere felt grounded rather than curated. Benjamin greeted Eleanor at the door with a steadier expression than she remembered from years prior. There was no forced enthusiasm, only civility. During dinner, conversation moved naturally. Market shifts.
Marina renovations.
Olivia's upcoming graduation. At one point, Benjamin paused. "I was angry for a long time," he admitted carefully. "I thought your husband tried to control us from the grave." Eleanor met his gaze calmly. "And now?" He exhaled slowly. "I think he trusted time more than he trusted us." The statement carried no sarcasm, only recognition. Olivia reached across the table, resting her hand briefly over her mother's. "I didn't understand what stewardship meant," she said quietly. "I thought inheritance meant opportunity. I didn't realize it also meant restraint." Eleanor nodded once. "Restraint protects opportunity," she replied. Later that evening, as dessert plates were cleared, Olivia brought out a small wooden box. It was simple, unpolished, unremarkable. She opened it to reveal a modest silver pocket watch. Not antique, not rare, purchased recently. I know it's not the same, Olivia said, but I wanted to start something new. Not as a replacement, as a reminder. Eleanor studied the object carefully. It held no market value to speak of, but it held intention. That, Eleanor said softly, is the point. Months later, the final trustee review convened. The atmosphere differed from the meeting 5 years prior. There was no defensive posture.
No impatiens vibrating vinis taler suites.
Documentation demonstrated consistent financial discipline, diversified investments built independently, and philanthropic contributions initiated without publicity. The senior trustees summarized the findings. Demonstrated maturation of fiduciary conduct. Reinstatement of conditional discretionary eligibility recommended. There was no applause.
No visible triumph.
Only acknowledgement. Control of the principal trust remained with Eleanor by design, but future generational participation would now operate under shared governance rather than unilateral oversight. After the meeting, Benjamin approached Eleanor privately. I was measuring success by what people saw, he said. I didn't think about what it revealed. She studied him for a moment. Most people don't, she replied. At the marina that evening, Eleanor walked along the water as twilight softened the horizon. She considered the arc of the past 5 years, the sail, the scrutiny, the strain, the slow recalibration. Charles had once told her that legacy was not about preservation of objects, but preservation of judgment. The watch had fulfilled its final function not by surviving, but by disappearing. Its absence had created pressure. Pressure had created clarity. The Aston Martin still existed. The townhouse still stood. Businesses still operated. But something quieter had replaced performance. Discretion. Olivia completed her degree and began consulting families on ethical wealth transition. She spoke candidly, without referencing her own story directly, about the psychological traps of sudden liquidity and symbolic consumption. Benjamin shifted his business model toward sustainable growth rather than aggressive expansion. Fewer headlines, stronger foundations. Their marriage, tested under scrutiny, stabilized under shared humility. They did not become perfect. They became aware. One late afternoon, Olivia visited the marina alone. She found her mother watching sailboats drift in. I used to think you were punishing us, Olivia admitted. I wasn't, Eleanor said gently. I was honoring a promise. Olivia nodded. And now, Eleanor replied, I'm watching what you choose when no one is forcing you. That was the true inheritance. Not money, not property. Choice under freedom. As years passed, portions of the trust were directed toward educational initiatives focused on financial literacy and ethical governance. Grants supported preservation of historical artifacts, not for display, but for contextual understanding. Legal clinics expanded access to transparent estate planning. Legacy shifted from possession to purpose. The Harrington watch would never return, but its lesson endured. In the end, what faded fastest was not wealth. It was illusion. Shine loses power when no one mistakes it for substance. And substance, once recognized, no longer requires shine. Eleanor often repeated one quiet truth when speaking to families at the clinic. Do not measure inheritance by what you receive. Measure it by what you protect when temptation makes spending feel justified. Time, after all, keeps moving. The only question is what it reveals along the way.